Hi, Eugene Edwards here with Fender Play Live, and we're diving into She Loves You by the Beatles. We're going to dive into some of the context and influences behind the song, the unique chord progressions, how to get the guitar tones that we hear on the record, and much more. Plus, we'll tell you how you can win some free gear on this show. So stick around. Helping us today with our deep dive is our trusty diving guide, as usual, Brian Whelan. Brian, say hello.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. And of course, we're doing it because we had to. Dr. Dylan Kelajuri.
Yeah.
It's splendid to be here. Stunningly fabulous. Thank you all. Thank you.
Look at this guy. All right. We're for those of you that don't already remember the resume, Brian has worked with artists like Chris Shiflett, Dwight Yoakam, Jim Lauderdale, Post Malone. He's also one of our favorite FPL guests, a friend of mine for over 20 years, I believe. Now, Brian, tell me what you're playing today. What you got there?
I'm playing, and you might not be able to tell from the headstock, but I'm playing a Fender guitar. This is a Paramount acoustic guitar that I went and picked up from the fine folks at Fender, and I think it just sounds great. You want to hear a little bit of it?
Yes, please.
All right, here. How about this? I'll get a little strummy strum going for you.
That's right. Woo! Nice and bright. Now, by the way,
nice. I like it.
For those of you listening out there, if it had a little sizzle to it, there's a reason for that, and we'll show that to you later. Dylan, what do you have today, gear wise, going on?
Yeah, I'm playing a 72 Tele Deluxe. This is it's got a B bender on it. That's why it's got a weird physics contraption back there. Don't pay attention to that. Don't look behind the curtain, folks. But yeah, so this thing, this is a force. This is something to reckon with. I can feel the spirits in this guitar. It sounds real good.
And it's you feel the spirits. It's a family heirloom, correct?
That's right. That's right. It sure is.
That's right.
Oh, how cool! I love that.
And then
I know.
And then I have the a reissue of the 1962 Gretsch Country Gentleman, the Chet Atkins Country Gentleman. I have coveted one of these for a very long time.
Yes.
Good for some little rockabilly too.
That's it right
Obviously, it's the appropriate guitar for this episode. We'll get more into it a little later. So we know everybody's talking about Get Back, the documentary, right? The Peter Jackson documentary on the Beatles.
I can't get enough of this thing.
Right, and it's good because there's 9 hours of it. Yeah. And for those of you who've seen it, you know the Beatles at that point in '69 are trying to get back to basics, and then so we're looking back on a song that's on our site early in their career. It's actually their 4th single, and this is when they're actually trying to get more complex. So we're kind of going to go the other way. So we thought we'd check it out. And after the show, make sure you check out both. We have the full song lesson, as we have the rhythm and the lead part. So check that out for the chord progression and the full song. You'll learn every part. And during the show, make sure to drop any questions in the comments today, and we'll try to get to them. Now, producer Perry has given us a nerd out today. So everybody, fasten your seatbelts. That's right. It's a full episode. Now, Brian, at the top here, can you give us, say, like a chorus and verse, kind of a mini version of She Loves You by the Beatles?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Here we go.
Thanks.
She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, 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 yeah. You think you've lost your love? Well, I saw her yesterday, it's you she's thinking of, and she told me what to say. She says she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. Said she loves you, and you know you should be glad. Ooh, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Excelente.
Man. All right, so I don't know how you got so much content in that version. One guy in acoustic. And by the way, for you beginners out there, notice Brian's just playing a lot of first position chords there. So this is a very approachable song, even though it has a lot of unique twists and turns. And we're gonna dive into that today. Now, let's back it up, though, and give some context here. The song truly sparked Beatlemania in the UK. This is where the thing really breaks open. It's released in the summer of '63. It was the best-selling record of the 1960s there in the UK. Now, Brian, what are some of the influences? We know that the Beatles were influenced by a lot of American records.
Yeah.
From where did they pull these ideas here?
So, yeah, I mean, like so many British bands that were, they were teenagers at the end of the 50s and the early 60s. So the Rolling Stones, the Animals, the Kinks, Pink Floyd, the list goes on and on and on. And they were heavily influenced by American records, what they called rhythm records at the time, that they would get in the port cities like Liverpool, where the Beatles were from. So they would get these American records. They were mostly from the American South. A lot of music out of New Orleans and Memphis and Nashville too. And at that time, there were still, late 50s, there started to be a lot of great rock and roll records coming out of Los Angeles. And then, of course, blues records from Chicago, which probably more pertinent to the Stones and the Animals than the Beatles, although they would have been into that too. But they were into lots and lots of stuff, and I think in particular, one of the really big influences on the Beatles was Buddy Holly, because he was a rocker and he had these rhythm records and he had rock and roll songs, but he also had an eye towards the pop formula. And some of this kind of what became folk rock and jangle rock down the road, that all kind of started with Buddy Holly. So, you could think of, if you go over to the site, there's a song called That'll Be the Day, which is a great Buddy Holly track. Let's see if I can figure this out. Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. That'll be the day when you make me cry. You said you're gonna leave, it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day, hey, when I die. And you can hear that kind of hiccup in the vocal, which is something that they all did it, especially John. George was a particularly huge Buddy Holly devotee. There's a story about him staying up late with his mother and practicing these songs, learning Buddy Holly songs by listening to the 45 over and over again with encouragement from his mom, which I think is great. Yeah. They're not all like that,
No,
but
I noticed. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I was going to say, but that early rock was a huge influence on them, and the Beatles would kind of cherry pick the little pieces that they want, and that in particular, that Buddy Holly vocal hiccup gets used a lot in Beatles records. You can hear that influence. What were you going to say, Eugene?
Well, in She Loves You, we Lancers had they take one word and they'll extend that last thing. So I heard you saying "day hey" in the Buddy Holly song, and it comes on a yesterday.
Right, sure. She told you what to say. That's all that's all kind of, and the way they kind of affect their voices to sound really bright and kind of boyish and laddish. That's the term I really like for it. And it's almost a little bit like kind of chipmunky. They kind of affect their voices to give that helium effect. That kind of comes from Buddy Holly too, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, right before we went live, we were talking about some of the sessions we get to do at Capitol Records in our careers. Someone else recorded at Capitol Records, a guy out of Bakersfield, and he turned out to be yes, exactly. Sorry, can you pick that up? I just dropped a studio name. Well, I'm proud of it. What am I supposed to say?
No, me too.
The Beatles were on Capitol. I'm tying it in here. I'm painting a picture, everyone. Anyway, any hoozles. There's a guy out of Bakersfield that they listened to who was pretty hot at the time, and they eventually covered. And what was his influence on this?
So you're talking, of course, about Buck Owens and the Bakersfield sound. So he, his band was based out of Bakersfield where they performed, but of course they cut all their records over the hill down in Hollywood. And, like I said, some of these records from L.A. were making their way all the way to Liverpool there at the beginning of the 60s. And the Beatles were really into Buck Owens as well. Again, this is a guy who had one foot in the kind of classic country and folk, bluegrass, gospel, a lot of those things, and then another kind of, one eye towards the future. And by that, I mean this kind of more inventive pop song structure as opposed to a folk song structure, which is more cyclical. Think Bob Dylan or House of the Rising Sun or something like that. So, Buck Owens, another song on the Fender Play side is Tiger by the Tail, and that's a song that starts with the chorus, which is what this song does. A lot of songs just start with, you would start with, you think you've lost it, you would just go, well, I think you've lost your love, right? So that would be kind of, that maybe was how it was written, who knows? But like that's how a lot of kind of typical songs would start. This song starts with, she loves you, yeah, 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 which is our chorus, really. And so, that's something that maybe they got from one of these other records like, I've got a tiger by the tail, it's plain to see. It won't be much when you get through with me. Well, I'm losing weight and turning mighty pale. Well, it looks like I've got a tiger by the tail. Or how about this? Yeah, and so it's and so that would have been an influence as well, not just in terms of the way he sounded, which I think they borrowed from that as well, but just in some of his ideas in terms of how to make a hit. This idea of starting with the biggest hook you have, which hopefully is your big chorus, just putting that right at the beginning of the song so they can reach out and grab you just from the very first moment you hear it.
And we'll talk about the Buck Owens and his lead guitar player Don Rich a little later when we talk about what George does in this tune. So it's gonna go back to Buck again. We already have a quick comment from the audience. I can't see John Weir says, anyone else think the fellow on the acoustic guitar looks like Ringo?
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now it's the big blue eyes. Now let me tell you a story.
I've got
John.
a lot of jobs this way, actually.
Well, Brian, you may not remember this, but back in 2004, you and we actually played the Cavern over in Liverpool, and
did.
I remember someone came up and noticed and made mention of the resemblance, and they took a picture of you, like a real tight shot of just your eyes. And then that kind of sold the idea of the very, very Ringo. So yeah, good call, John.
Ringo has those very doleful eyes, I remember when they called Jimmy Nichols, and I thought they didn't love me anymore.
Now, what about the harmonies here? The vocal harmonies going on that John and Paul have going on this tune.
Well, they do a really cool thing, which belies another influence, pretty significant influence on them, who's the Everly Brothers. And what they do is they are John and Paul are singing in unison for the first part of the phrase, and then they split to two different notes. So one of them goes, I think you've lost your love. That's John, right? And then Paul goes, I think you've lost your love. So you can see the first four notes are the same notes that they're singing. They're doing them in unison. And then on the last note, they split. That's something that they most likely got from an Everly Brothers song called Kathy's Clown, which does a really similar thing. There are some Everly Brothers tracks on Fender Play if you want to go check those out. And definitely listen to Kathy's Clown and tell me that you are not hearing that influence on this song.
Right, and one of the songs we have on the site, Everly Brothers tune, is Walk Right Back, which just is a good example, not so much of that split thing, because they actually follow that, but it's that major third harmony, and they sing it so tightly. And, the Everly Brothers being siblings, their voices were just very similar. And you have noticed that John and Paul had this ability to kind of affect that, yeah? Yeah,
and I referenced it a second ago, where they kind of were imitating one another a little bit, but I think that the more likely thing was that they were both affecting their voice in a really similar way, which is, I alluded to it earlier, but it told you what to say. So you can kind of see my voice, my face is kind of stretched a little bit like that, and you get this really bright, kind of piercing, a little bit kind of nasally tone that you get a little bit from doing that. And then when you have two guys doing it together, so not even one person doubling his own voice, but just two guys who are both like super talented, who are both kind of going for this same sound, they didn't need to double. They certainly did as time went on, but they've just made their own double in real time, which I think is really Go ahead.
Instead of double tracking is what you mean. Instead of
Of
re-recording your
course.
voice in the same notes. Yeah.
Instead of just, because they would do that. One of them would go into the studio and sing, and then they would set up another track and they would just sing the same thing again. And so that's what you call double tracking in the studio. And that's, before they were aware of that or potentially had the technology to do that, they were just creating their own, and they would do it live. That's one of the really cool things about the Beatles, and one of the really influential things, although if you don't have two guys like that, it's kind of hard to pull it off. But when you can have singing in unison like that, it just adds all this power to the melody.
In fact, we're going to move on to the chord progression here, but I just want to make sure if you watch footage of them doing this song live, on the verse, George, he doesn't do it on the record, but in concert, he'll step up and double John's line on "Told her what to say." Then he steps away. Right. Da, 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 da. So they were doing that live too to beef it up. We have here's a segue to that. Watch, hey Dylan, watch this. I'm going to segue. Ready?
Okay, go.
Scott Fogelman at Fender, he says, compared to the other songs from the Beatles at the time, what is unglue about this song in sound or notes? Help me out here. What is unique?
Unique,
I don't know.
I see.
I just did a what's the
you did a Ron Burgundy.
The Ron Burgundy move.
Yes.
It's the turtleneck and blazer that made me do it. So what is unique about this song in terms of its harmonic complex? So let's talk about the chords and stuff, because this is where the twists and turns really show up, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. This is what we want to talk about. Our chord progression here is really interesting. If you have watched Fender play live in the past, you'll know that we've talked about certain chord progressions that are really common in popular music. We've talked about a 1-4-5 chord progression. So if I'm in G, 1, 4, 5, and then we've also talked, I believe, about 1 minor 6, 4, and 5. Sometimes those are called ice cream truck changes, and those go like this. Okay, so that's going to be our ice cream change. And the interesting thing is that seems to be where they started for this song. And yet the C chord, our 4 chord, is replaced. They move it 1 half step down to B minor. So instead of, you said you lost your love, well, I saw her yesterday, which would be really typical, it's changed to this. Said you lost your love, told me yesterday, right? So you take this really typical, really common chord progression and twist it 1 degree. One chord in the progression moves literally 1 half step, and you gives it a totally different feel and makes it stand out, makes it more unique.
Yeah, there you go. So there's that.
And that's just one example.
Yeah, exactly. Also, we hear George, when he does add his third part harmony, he sings a very significant note that it really, really, really jumps out. Dylan, can you talk about that note that George sings when he sings that? He sings.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so the first time they sing through it, they're basically repeating this motive. Right? And they're doing it in a way where it's like we're going to repeat that motive regardless of what chords are going on. So we've got Loves me,
over G,
right?
and then over
G, and then over E minor, right? And then over C, sorry. And that's our really interesting tone right there. Because we end up with a flat 5 over C, and that's a non-diatonic tone, or what you would call dissonance. Mm-hmm. This song uses all 5 of the 7 different chords that you could use in a key.
Oh,
and it sticks to a lot of the regular rules, except for the fact that it has a couple non-diatonic tones in a couple places. Another one is when you're starting the song, or every time you go to the refrain, the second chord in the song's an A7. Normally that would resolve to a D, and in this case, it resolves to a C minor, right? And so you have 2 different tones that are sort of target tones. So, and then normally this would go here, except it moves to C minor. And the 2 different tones that are there are this E natural and C sharp, which end up moving to C, and E flat. And normally both of those would move up to the next chord. So they are defying some rules here of standard voice leading that would frankly not be accepted in the 1600s. I can tell you that right now.
Right, timing's
that's
everything.
a fact.
And then George sings the sixth on the last.
That's right.
So we hear that chord, which their producer almost nixed because he said it was quite Glenn Miller. It was George's idea, George Harrison's idea, I should say, because he was the most jazz curious, and we'll talk about his influence in the song. So let's talk about. No, they were bothered. The Beatles were bothered by their previous single, which was "From Me to You," which we have on the site, but which was very successful. But they were kind of slagged in the music press a little bit about it being a little maybe not up to their standard. Which those guys carried that scar forever because they even said, well, it was our third single. How much of a standard could we have? Brian, can you play a little bit of From Me to You so we can hear?
Will you remind me of the key? What's the key of that song, Eugene?
C major. If
there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do, just call on me and I'll send it along with love from me to you. I got everything that you want and a heart that's so true. Just call on me and I'll send it along with love from me to you. Great song.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I love that. How charming is that? But it's obviously very diatonic to the key of C major. Now you can learn that song on the Fender site, and I advise you to do so. And it's a great, but you're right, they're using the 1, the 6 minor, the 4, the 5.
Yeah, it's a little more prototypical, and I just thought, now that we're sitting here talking about it, I think they actually do that same thing that we were talking about vocally, where they sing in unison and then split. Hey, Perry said we could nerd out. Can I just take a
He
question?
said so. He said so.
Yes.
Perry, you
Yes.
said that we could do this. And so
Listen to it.
And so, Dylan, tell me a little bit about, just since you're the doctor here, and I just majored in glass blowing, so you can help out here. Tell me what that is technically called when the melodies are in unison and then they split apart. Tell me a little bit in some technical terms, because I just love this stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So basically, if one note stays in the same position, which is what happens in this case, it's called oblique motion, right? Because one is staying the same and the other one's moving. And a couple times in the verse, you have contrary motion because they move in other directions. So what's really cool about this is that maybe by accident, they are actually moving from unison tones, what we would call maybe a tutti sometimes in music. They're moving to oblique motion, which are counterpart ideas, or contrary motion. So these are really fundamental species counterpoint ideas, or fundamental movement in music that you hear taking place at like a pop level.
Right, and you got to understand, these two guys were not trained in music. They were what they did really well was they had what you call really big ears. They just listened to everything that came their way. So they listened to the American rhythm records, like we kind of were talking about at the beginning of the show. But, Paul McCartney's father was a musician, and so there was dance hall music, Dixieland music, songs from musicals and from what you call the American songbook, like Johnny Mercer doing Autumn Leaves and stuff. And so they would have been hearing just everything, and they took it all in, and just by trial and error, by kind of hacking away at the guitar, figured out, well, it's going to be an A major instead of an A minor, not knowing which one was diatonic and which one was chromatic. They just kind of used their ears, and through trial and error found the right place for all these chords.
That's pretty inspiring. Now, I don't know, Brian, I don't know if you noticed or not, but Dylan just all of a sudden just shows up with a bass.
Oh yeah, what is that? How did that?
That's a little passive aggressive,
ceiling,
but I think Dylan
Very
wants to talk about the bass part.
Very Paul, yeah.
It's really cool. And I brought a band. Are you guys ready? Okay, I brought a band. I'm just gonna play a little bit of the bass part for you guys. Yeah, hey, you guys ready? 2. Here we go. So that's
Yeah,
where
you know,
it would
Dylan,
normally go.
you had a couple of little boo-boos there. That's not exactly,
I did,
That's not exactly what I played.
I'm sure it's not. There's one part in there where he goes do 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 do, and you can hear all these different themes that are coming from all types of Americana music, like Brian was pointing out in the beginning, and a lot of stuff from New Orleans, and it's like it's all smashed into one song, all these different ideas and different styles of music, and the bass part is no exception. There's a clave pattern that's in there. There's it's a really cool amalgamation of different elements.
I want to, before we get to George Harrison's part, I do want to mention just there's just a relentless amount of hooks going on at all times, right? I think Brian, you said like every 2 beats something's happening. In fact, when everyone goes back and rewatches this episode 500 times individually, so it's the most watched episode of FPL history, you'll notice when Brian's saying it by himself, because she loves you. You actually played that little bass line. I don't know if you realized you did it, but
Oh, yeah.
no, that can't be bad. You kind of snuck that little clave thing that Dylan just pointed out.
I mean, these guys, you could just go on and on, but they really, they have this really short song, and they have really limited resources. They were cutting mostly live. There were some overdubs, but they're cutting mostly live with, as Gene said, it's 4 guys, drums, bass, 2 guitars, and then 3 guys singing, and using the power of their composition and arranging. They had a great producer also. They're able to really to completely streamline this song to the point where there's not an ounce of fat on it, and every single thing serves a purpose. Yeah. Like, there's a reason why Paul is going 1 5 1 5 1. Said you lost your love. It's all yesterday. Like, there's a reason why he's doing 1 5. There's a reason why he does just the root, and then there's a reason why he goes to his clave. It's because she loves you. There's a peak there, and he wants to give it a kind of a kick, and so the groove changes a little bit, very briefly, and so it's kind of like everything just in its right place. Really, a masterpiece, and there are 100 examples we could get into.
And let's not leave out Ringo here. I mean, there's even hooks in the drums. You mentioned that little accent. She loves you, bomb. Right? He jumps in.
He hits it. They hit it together.
But he comes in. It's a 2-count intro, by the way. It's almost like we came in halfway through the song. It's almost like Ringo's drums get thrown down a stairwell, boom, 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 and then she loves you. We're just, oh my gosh, we're going, and he stays on his floor, on his toms throughout the whole chorus. It's not till the very last that he then goes to his hi-hats. We don't hear cymbals at all. This is very atypical playing on a record. And very significantly, Ringo keeps that hi-hat open and just sloshes it. Adds to the energy of the whole thing. This is the first time, by the way, on a Beatles session that an overhead mic was used over the drums. So you're getting a lot of room sound. This really helps the energy of this record. And by the way, as I said, once there's 2 beats, they start, and John and Paul come in singing, or 3 of them start singing, and they really never stop singing until the very last note of the song, right? There's no instrumental break or anything. They just all the way through.
That's it. And the arrangement is just king here. When what they do together, when they split apart, none of it is by accident. And also, it's interesting because when you have a song like this that's so short, the song actually, the one thing that it doesn't have, and it is not a complaint, it doesn't really have dynamics. It pretty much is just up the whole time. I mean, it's like this this adrenaline shot of a record, which is, of course, how it functioned, culturally as well. That's what this did.
At best, the only dynamic is when they just stop.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah, that's the dynamics.
In every chorus.
Oh, sure.
But it's not a long stop. But I mean,
it's
they
just
one
beat.
Attention with that. This is why like that, and then they're going right until the very dramatic. You should. A measure of 2/4 briefly. Be glad, and they start in. Now, this is where the guitar of George Harrison comes in. Now, this is where it just drives me nuts how great he is on this record. It's their 4th single. They'd already put out the first full length. And George seems to really step up quite a bit in this song, in my opinion. considering it has no musical bridge, no guitar solo. So I want to dive into the lead parts of this a bit. There's that double stop over the turnaround in the G chord, right? No, you should. Over G major, we hear, huh? Now this is taught on the lead guitar part on the site, on the Fender site. And so this reminds me of Buck Owens and Don Rich, where Buck would be playing like a major chord, and Don Rich, his lead guitar player, would play these minor pentatonic things over Buck's very, very major chord. There's Buck just jamming here, and then Don Rich. Well, George takes it one step further, and he plays. I mean, what's he doing, Dylan? It starts with the
fourths.
They're fourths. There you go. It starts the flat 7 and the flat 3rd. This is for the theory guys out there. Then I mean, that's Smoke on the Water, but
I was going to say,
a little early.
So you can learn this on the site, but it's such a beautiful thing to do. And it's over, 6 quarter notes? Like the only 6 quarter notes where John and Paul aren't singing.
Yeah.
He fills that gap.
They give him his... They give him his moment. They just give him his moment, and he makes the most of it, And those
it's
of
in
you
that
who are,
space.
yeah, and those of you who when we were on here talking about Nirvana, of course, he was a big Beatles fan, but we were talking about power chords omitting the third, and how that kind of creates a certain kind of musical tension because the lack of a third. It tells you that, or rather, it doesn't tell you the quality of the chord, if it is major or minor. In this case, this is both. This is the major third and the minor third together. So that's it's a different kind of musical tension, very common in American roots music, starting with the blues and gospel, and then moving into pretty much everything else, rock and roll. Being the main one, where and country music too, where you kind of you'll have one person playing a major chord with here's B, that's my major third, and then you'll get our minor scale, minor pentatonic, also on the Fender Play app, and that's using the flat third, and so you kind of you put those two things against one another, that's going to create some tension there, just a little bit of the right kind of tension.
That's right. You got an emergency going on there, Brian.
I know. I better check that out. Yeah.
As long as it's not about you, as long as you're safe. No. And also George does this really decorative, almost thematic style of playing here because he anticipates the chorus. It's really subtle when they sing, "She loves you." He then goes, "No, that can't be bad." Then the E minor, and he plays it again. Which of course he's mimicking the yeah, even when they're not singing it. So he's just doing this beautiful support of this whole thing. It just drives me crazy how clever this is. She loves you, and you know that can't be bad. He plays it twice, and he anticipates the E minor. It's so clever. Also notice he's fretting notes and then having some of his strings open at the same time. This is very country. So I'm just moving the D string and high E string. They're playing an octave of each other, and that moves down. But I'm going to play the open G and open B at the same time. Again, this is on the site. And then at the very end of the song, George isn't done. He's not done at all. So we get to the "No, you should be glad." That last part, George does this. And then over the C major. No, George it's a Chet Atkins model guitar. He's a big Chet Atkins fan. George was the most jazz curious of the guys here, and so he wants to get one last cool thing happening. And this we've heard already in the song. Now, and then he decides to play it, and we've got this C sharp note, which is the tension note that Dylan mentioned earlier, and we heard that in the A7. But he implies that A7 chord again, even though John is playing an E minor. And he plays it there because he wants this open B. Otherwise, it'd be much easier to just go. But he won't have that. So that's really important to George. He'll keep that. And then he plays the C in a cage system, the E-shaped C chord. And then he drops the high B or the B and high E string down for a moment, creating a C major 7 flat 5. and then top 4 strings all along the 5th fret, making a C6 chord, and it resolves to just a regular old G major, which he sings. He sings the 6th note on top of it. Oh, hey, I think these guys were probably pretty good.
Yeah, very good. That was great.
This just drives me crazy how cool that is. Anyway, very thoughtful stuff. And by the way, George got his country gent, his 62 country gent, right before this session starts. The first time he gets to use it. He also got a Maestro fuzz box, and we see it in pictures on that session. It's wired up. It's on top of his amp. Decided not to use it. Altered history. What if George had used fuzz tone on "She Loves You"? He would have beat the Stones by 2 years, right? Satisfaction's a whole other story.
Except Paul wouldn't let him use it, so he didn't get to use it on that session, you know?
Now, considering John and Paul started writing this song on the road, and then they're cutting this thing 5 days later. I don't know if George even had much. I mean, that's not a lot of time for George to come up with all of this. And we're going to talk about the tone here. But one more thing, too. It clearly sounds like George's guitar part was the one overdub. We hear several edits in the song, meaning they performed it all at once several times, and they try to take the best parts of each take. In third verse, we hear that rhythm drop out a bit, where they definitely did a tape edit, but George's guitar is clear as a bell when he plays that. So that's only George is on a separate track. And all of this is mono, by the way. That's all mono. Let's talk about tones. Last but not least, John's acoustic, when we're talking at the top about how your acoustic doesn't sound like just a normal acoustic necessarily, that's because John's acoustic is on the session is plugged into an amplifier. They had the acoustics with a pickup on it, like most of you at home probably have. So this is encouraging. Let's talk about this a little bit, guys. So Brian, can you just play those chords again, and then we'll have Dylan talk about what's going on.
A little grittier than normal because we're going into an amp here. So
right.
It's and
what's funny, we see those pictures of that jumbo acoustic and early Beatles photos. I think John and George thought they were ordering a different guitar, like a proper electric hollow body guitar, and then they came back with that, and they're like, okay. But it becomes significant in their early tone. In fact, that's the first guitar we hear on "I Feel Fine." It's John's acoustic into those Vox AC30s. That's John's acoustic, and then George doubles them on electric. So it's a significant part of Beatle tone. Dylan, what can you tell the folks at home how to get started in terms of like using their acoustic with an amp?
Yeah, so if you plug your acoustic into an amp and the amp is super loud, you're going to have a sonic experience of an undesirable element.
That's true.
So the first thing I would tell you if you're going to plug your acoustic into an amp is to turn it down.
Yeah. Okay.
And then probably don't have the gain up too loud. But yeah, it does a lot of things. So if you are playing acoustic and you plug this into your amp, it's kind of like hollowing out the sound a little bit, right? It's sort of what we would call a telephone EQ. Mm-hmm. It's taking off a lot of the super highs and a lot of the super lows and taking what's an organic sound and making it sort of a synthetic sound. If you're playing electric, if you have a GTX, there's the tone to this song actually that's on the site, the Fender Tone website. You can download to your amp. Also, there is sort of it's a British style amp from the 60s of a certain name.
Sure.
And you can select that amp, and I did. This is what it sounds like through this telly. So it's getting kind of like that hollowed out tone, and then I did, just to mess around with what Brian was talking about, I threw on the range. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. I threw on a range boost, which is basically a little bit of added distortion on there to see what that would be like. So you could even do what George didn't have the ability to do, which is use distortion. You could go back and rewrite history like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You know?
Very cool.
Give it a shot.
That's inspiring. That's great.
Yeah, well,
So, and then by the way, just for those out there at home, I downloaded the preset for the song from the site, I should say. And so yes, I have the country gent, but also I'm going through the "She Loves You" preset, and that's how I'm getting my George tone. So
now,
yes,
Dylan, what are you using? Are you using the British 60s pop
I am using the British 60s amp, correct?
And that's what I'm plugged into as well. The preset was a little fuzzy for our production team, and so we've dialed that back a little bit. But that's about as close as what we can get to what John would have been doing, because he's correct me, Gene. He's playing an acoustic guitar on this track, right? It's an acoustic guitar plugged into an amp.
Plugged directly into the amp, and so it has a certain. It does jangle, but it has a certain richness to it that it wouldn't be if you just put a microphone in front of that acoustic. It's actually it's running a regular cable into the amp.
Excellent.
So it's just a sonic advantage that the Beatles ended up having by accident. A couple of questions before we hear you do the song, Brian, one last time, and before we take it home. Abby asks, "I've heard this is the first folk rock song. Is that true?" And this subjective answer.
The first folk rock song, which is interesting because this is was it McGuinn, Roger McGuinn, that kind of said this somewhere along the line. Which is interesting because I always think of Mr. Tambourine Man as the first folk rock song, but what they were doing, and that when McGuinn and the Byrds were doing Mr. Tambourine Man, he got a hold of a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar, which he saw George Harrison play in Hard Day's Night, which came later. But this just goes to show you, I mean, he'd been listening to the Beatles from the beginning. And I think that there's an argument that could be made, but I think that the folk idiom was something that the Beatles were trying to expand and in some ways kind of break out of with these kinds of compositions. A lot of these kind of chords that we're talking about are not really what you would think of as folk chords. And then the form, when you think of a folk form, the blues is a 12-bar blues is a folk form. So you have a 12-bar form that you just do over and over and over again. I mentioned House of the Rising Sun or any iconic Bob Dylan songs like Blowing in the Wind or Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. They don't have an A section and a B section and a bridge and a coda. They just have one section, and it goes around over and over again. So when I think of folk, that's what I think of. And the Beatles were kind of kicking against that a little bit with this song to kind of use some of these non-chord tones, starting a song with a chorus, all these kind of little tricks that make it more like what I would call pop than folk. That's just, this is all subjective, but that's how I see it.
I do, and of course, when we say Roger McGuinn, that's the guy from the Byrds, and I do remember him saying something about what he noticed being a folk guy. A lot of folk music, you use little passing and leading tones. So even if you're just going from from G to E minor, you do this little passing tone, a little note in between, or little passing tones in between the chords. And I think he was probably hearing that in the Beatles. Certainly it's spelled out in the guitar, that sort of thing. So I think he was picking up on that. Of course, they're strumming electric guitars as if they were acoustics, which is more of that jangle thing. Another question from Adam Kimball. I think I have an answer for this one. Best Beatles song for beginners on acoustic. Well, we have a couple of songs on the site. As Brian played From Me to You, that's a good one. Also, we have For You Blues, which is a later song, but it's a simple 12-bar blues that George wrote. And I promise we'll do an episode on that one. So those are great. Also, I would start with their very first single, Love Me Do.
That's what I was
just 3 chords.
Yeah, that's a great one.
In fact, start with the first Beatles single and then just learn all the songs for the because they do.
Yeah,
they
it's
start
like 250,
very
right? It's about 250 songs. By the time you get to the end, you'll be a virtuoso. You'll be all set. You don't have to learn anything else after that.
6 years.
You'll be Jake, Adam. You'll be fine. James Foster asks, Brian, do you think the Beatles planned all this complexity? And you kind of mentioned this before, or did they just mess around until it sounded right to them? I think you kind of addressed that earlier.
I think that they did want it. I don't know. Like we were kind of alluding to, they didn't really have formal music training, but they knew a lot, and I think that their goal was to create a streamlined pop record that had no, that was, economical, had no wasted space. That double stop parallel fourths, lick that Gene was playing. So that's George's lick. That's his big moment. as Gene mentioned, he has like a bar to do that. He has a really limited space to do that. But when he gets his moment, he does it. So vocally, instrumental wise, arrangement wise, production wise, we've said it now 6 times, but there's a lot packed in here, and I believe that was intentional. A lot, and I think that a lot of the composition and finding some of these complex chord tones, I think some of that was probably trial and error. But really, I think that the goal was to get there and to pack it chock full of those things.
I think you're right. Now, before we get to homework and all that fun stuff, can we just this song? So it's like 2 minutes and change, basically. So Brian, can you just play "She Loves You"? I'm so sorry, I'm not there to sing harmony, but just go for it.
I'll try to play it even faster. I'm going to try to shave off a few seconds.
We'll speed up the tape.
She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, 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 yeah. You said you lost your love. I saw her yesterday. It's who she's thinking of. And she told me what to say. She says she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. She said she loves you, you know you should be glad. And you hurt her so, she almost lost her mind. Now she says she knows you're not the hurting kind. She says she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. Said she loves you, you know you should be glad. Ooh, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. It's only fair I can hurt you too. Apologize to her because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. She said she loves you, you know you should be glad. Ooh, she loves me, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right.
It's like eating ice
Hey,
cream.
listen,
It's
guys.
perfect. Yes.
Well, Brian, that's a one-take live situation. I just want people at home to appreciate, please, this guy that we have access to. Brian sings all of "She Loves You." It's phenomenal. And I remember this when we did the Nirvana episode, when was it, last month or so, that you have this ability to sing these high notes, like that G at the very end of the song, full voice. But somehow you don't have to scream. I don't know. You don't overload the mic. It's really, really special talent, and we're really, really lucky to have you. I just got excited. I just want to make mention of that. On
It's the pleasure's all on this end of the camera, buddy. I'm so happy to be here.
My gosh, you made that look so easy. So there you go, folks. Just do what Brian did, and you've got "She Loves You."
Yeah. Your troubles will be over. Just do it like me. It's going to be fine.
We didn't even talk about, and when we hear that song all the way through, those 3 verses definitely tell a specific story. Maybe for another time we'll talk about that, but they're giving advice to a buddy. It's not a love triangle. It's just kind of a, hey, and I love it. And you actually captured how John, to my ear on the record, sounds rather sarcastic when he sings "Apologize." Apologize. I don't know. I just hear it that way.
Oh, yeah. Very John, though. Very John, though. That.
All right. So, Dylan, it's your turn now to assign some homework, man.
Okay, so just do it like Brian does. That should work, guys. That's all. No, okay, all right. So if you're a beginner, let's just try getting from that G to E minor. So if you're on Path and Fender Play, you might be working on G to C as a beginner. This isn't gonna be too much of a stretch. You've got your G going, and then you're gonna do what a 4-string E minor. And that's going to get you a good chunk of this song going. So it'll get you on the road to being able to play the whole thing. If you're intermediate, we're going to throw the entire thing at you. So do the full song lesson, learn the entire song, including the whole everything, the whole kit and caboodle. Go for it. And finally, if you're advanced, well, we are going to challenge you here. So what we want you to do is take a traditional chord progression. So we want you to take a chord progression and rewrite it. So the one I just did, that 1, 6, 2, 5, I might do. And then the neighbors come over.
Listen to those fancy chords, fancy. Okay. They're gonna give him a lot of money for that stuff, man.
I don't know. You get paid by the note. That's right. And so, challenge yourself. Take a traditional chord progression and put a spin on it for us.
Very, very well. Have fun with that homework, guys. And Dylan, what have you got for us today, man, in terms of the giveaway?
So just a little thing that happens at the end of every show. It's the Fender Play giveaway. We give away a free piece of gear to a lucky Fender Play subscriber simply for using Fender Play for a minimum of 21 minutes in a week. And you're automatically entered to win simply by using that 21 minutes. And you can pick from basses, guitars, amplifiers, all kinds of gear that you choose from. Do you guys want to hear who won this week?
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Can you guys give me a little bit of fanfare, a little Beatles-esque fanfare? 2, 3, go. That's it. There it is. Jim K.
Way to go, Jim K. Congratulations, buddy. Way to go. Enjoy your new guitar, bass, amp, ukulele, whatever it is you choose. And what else you got for us, Dylan?
Exciting. New stuff on the site. So we've got...
I mean, just freshly delivered right now in the script, too.
I just found out right now. Chain. Chain of fool. I won't put you through my Aretha Franklin. That's the actual intro, guys. That's perfect. You can learn that on the site now. You guys remember this? Work all day. Anyways, it's Good Time by
Alan Jackson.
Alan Jackson.
So Brent Mason plays the lead on that record. It's unbelievably cool.
It'll hurt you.
I taught this Aretha and the Alan Jackson tunes. So
did you really? Okay, so
too bad. Yeah, too bad.
Eugene's going to help you guys. He's going to help you guys out.
That's right.
Also, of course, there's the Beatles collection and the holiday collection, and more holiday stuff coming up. But plenty of stuff on the holiday collection now. Got a couple Hanukkah songs on there, so check them out.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful time of the year. Huge thank you, Dylan. Thank you so much. And huge thank you to the very talented Brian Whelan, man.
Yes.
Thank you so much for helping us on our deep dive
into
She Loves
Thank you both for having me.
We were allowed to nerd out. We went, look, for a 2-minute, 20-second song, we went an hour.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it, folks. Hey, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, lots to talk about in that record.
Apparently. All right. Now, Brian, what do you have coming up, man? What do you want to plug?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm doing a really cool show. It's a toy drive that I'm going to be doing right here in Los Angeles next week. It's a 4-band bill, and me and my friend Matt Penn, who's a great musician, have put a little band together, and we're going to be playing some country music for you at the Echoplex on it's a week from tomorrow. It's next Thursday. So come on down. It's for a good cause. You bring a toy with you and hear some country music.
Perfect, man. Great to hear some live music. Cool. And speaking of bands, Dylan, how'd you keep that off-camera band of yours to stay quiet this whole time? That's really extraordinary.
You know what? These guys, they're completely out of control. I've just sedated them the entire time. It's perfect.
Oh, smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, trank dart.
Yeah,
always
trank
works.
dart. Yeah.
All right. Well, by the way,
Jim K is in the audience. This might be a first.
He's actually here. He's in the comments, just like somebody's going to get him a smelling salt. He passed out.
Jim, congratulations.
Way to go, buddy.
You did it, Jim. You did it.
And now, by the way, Next week is a holiday episode with Molly Miller and special guests, so make sure you tune in. So we are live next week, so we want to see you here. Until then, keep safe, keep practicing, and we'll see you next week at the same time, the same bat channel. Let's go out on a big G chord on the count of 4. Make sure you're typing the capital G in the comment sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah!